Whoa, that was a abbreviated countdown. Whoops. Anyway, hello out there and welcome to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com, which is on the Rivals Network. I'm Caleb Alexander. I'm the publisher and handle a lot of recruiting. I'm joined by Alan Cole, who is the beat reporter for all the major sports. And right now, we're in the midst of the run up to football season. 10 days away. We're
10 days. There. I mean, 3 days if you count weird games in Ireland and in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, we're definitely about to have a little bit of a feature, I think, tomorrow on the week 0 game. So, I mean, I'm a football junkie. I'll definitely watch some of that, even though
I'll be into it.
It's probably not going to be the most quality, although I'm kind of excited about that Nebraska Northwestern game. I think that's going to be interesting.
I mean, it's something for Gamecocks. You've got Helinski, a quarterback there, Northwestern, so that's something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I kind of actually forgot about that. He just got named the starter last week, so that'd be good. All right, before we get too deep into fall camp stuff, let's talk about recruiting because that has been going pretty well.
Very
lately.
well for Shane Beamer the last week or so.
The Rivals national team actually, and I can put this link on the Insiders Forum here in a little bit. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was Adam Friedman or Gorney. I get them confused because they're both Adam. But we're talking about the hottest teams in the country right now in recruiting, and they mentioned South Carolina as being on that list. And it's easy to see why, because over the last month, there have been 4 Rivals 250 recruits that have committed. Let's see, Marky Anderson, Xavier Mcleod, Xavier Hardy. There was a 4th one. I don't know. But anyway, there's been quite a bit of momentum going. So this past weekend, Camden, South Carolina, D lineman Xavier Mcleod, who we very much kind of had the inside scoop on that one for a couple weeks here, and we've been mentioning it for a couple weeks here. Fulfilled my future cast. I'm back on the right side of history on those, and committed to South Carolina on Friday. And then we got kind of a surprise, but not really a surprise if you were paying attention to what's been going on in my weekly recruiting wrap-ups, which we're doing this a day early today, so I have a little bit less to tease on that end. But anyway, Macon, Georgia D lineman Xavier Hardy also committed sort of surprisingly on Sunday afternoon. So Shane Beamer tweeted out a welcome home, and then within half an hour, Hardy went live with that. So that's 2 big time pickups for the D line, and really in general that the D line recruiting looks way different than it did a few weeks ago. So Montague Rames, that was the other Rivals 250 guy that I wasn't thinking of. So yeah, with the addition of Rames, Mcleod, and Hardy, and then some of the other guys that they're kind of still in the mix with, like Desmond Umeozulu, who's announcing on Monday, who have a future cast in for South Carolina too. Yeah, that room's looking
right. Changed pretty fast there.
Yeah.
You have the note here. I did think it was interesting that I guess this would have been Tuesday. Shane Beamer, in his opening statement at the press conference, said he made sure to mention that a week from Saturday, Clemson's not at home, Georgia's not at home, North Carolina's not at home, Tennessee's not at home Saturday. They're playing next Thursday night in Knoxville. And his whole thing was, if you're a recruit, where else are you going to be next Saturday? You should come to Williams-Brice for Georgia State. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to throw in.
This is something we talked about back during SEC Media Days, but it seems like pretty much anytime he's got an opportunity to speak to the public, he's using that opportunity to recruit, to kind of sell the program, and also seems like sometimes he hints to certain kids, like, hey, I'm thinking about you right now, like, why don't you come on in? So yeah, we'll have a full list of those visitors for next weekend coming probably mid next week, but I do know that there's some names that are already starting to stack up for that, including some 2024 prospects. This isn't for that weekend, but we did just get confirmation that 2024 in-state O-lineman Cam Pringle who's very important in that class, should be in town for the SC State game. That's a few weeks down the road. And it's also possible he's going to come for Georgia, but we're not sure yet. Someone I do know will definitely be there for Georgia, not Georgia State. So a few weeks later, Nicholas Harbor, 5-star, number 9 rated recruit in the country, number 1 overall athlete in the country, is set for an official visit on September 17th for the Georgia game. So that'll be a pretty big one there. South Carolina is still in really good shape right there, and also, like I said, I have a future cast in for Umeozulu to South Carolina. They're pretty good friends from what I understand, Harbor and Umeozulu. So that, those relationships could go a long way, and we'll see how all that plays out. A couple other just quick 2024 notes. We have some articles on the site right now from number 1 linebacker in the country, Sammy Brown, and also Heaven Brown Schuler. Both are very important 2024 recruits, and both were in town for the cookout at the end of July. And we've still just been kind of gathering quotes from different people that were at that cookout because it was a huge event. But they both spoke very highly of South Carolina, and they also spoke about maybe wanting to play together. So that's something to kind of keep in mind and look at going forward. They've been playing together since Pop Warner, apparently. I don't know if it's Pop Warner.
Jefferson High School there. Yeah, it's right outside of Athens.
Yeah. Let's see, recruiting notes. Oh, the only other thing that I didn't mention just now before we get into full-on fall camp football stuff, as we spoke about last week, 2023 4-star center in basketball, Jordan Butler out of Christchurch, he took an official visit to South Carolina. It went pretty well. Spoken to a few people that are familiar with him and familiar with the program. Right now, I would say South Carolina is very much in the mix, and maybe mostly down to Florida State, South Carolina. I know Auburn at one time was kind of in there, but I don't know that they're as big at the moment. But that would just be another important in-state recruit if Paris could ultimately land him. And we've seen that, that's been an emphasis so far. I know. Yeah, exactly. I know Gigi Jackson spent a lot of time speaking with Butler this weekend and kind of selling him on the idea of staying home. And I mean, who better to sell you than the number? Well, what was once the number 1?
History,
yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's pretty much it on recruiting. On Friday on GamecockScoop.com, there will be a premium article like there is every Friday with the weekly recruiting wrap-up. That's usually one of our bigger articles of the week every week. So I'll let you know my final take, or close to final take, on Umeozulu at that point, and kind of what to look for going forward. Anyway, we got some fall camp stuff going. So the past 2 days, several players spoke, got to speak to Coach Beamer, and then both coordinators spoke today. And one of the big things that I think that we were trying to figure out is what went on in the second scrimmage. So with the first scrimmage, they had immediate press coverage right after. But this week we didn't get into a little bit later. So what are you hearing as far as takeaway from the scrimmage?
I got maybe not a big, but I've got an article coming on the second scrimmage, just trying to read the tea leaves there of what everybody's been saying. That should be dropping on the website either tonight or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. But in terms of, what I have already been hearing, I think the biggest take is that the offense is starting to catch up with defense, and not even so much that it was behind schedule like we talked about last week, but it was still behind the defense, as these things usually are early in fall camp. By the sounds of it, the offense has been a lot crisper in the last week. You had Zach Pickens talking about how the offense had them kind of running a little bit during the second scrimmage a lot. They were making a lot of quick checks, calls, moving them side to side. Everyone's been positive on the turnover front too. That was something Luke Doty talked about yesterday, about how there really haven't been any turnovers in either scrimmage, but especially they were very clean in the second one, which obviously that's what you want as coaches, especially kind of heading in towards an actual game here.
Well, sort of what you want, right? That's
Well, that does go both ways. I did write a little bit about
Right.
that too, what that means for the other side of the ball.
Yeah, because last year they led the SEC in turnovers with 24. So yeah, is that the defense isn't being as effective at creating them, or the offense is just being really, really good at protecting the ball?
It
Let's hope
sounds like
it's
more of the latter.
yeah.
Again, you're getting players, you're getting coach speak, but I think that's obviously where having Spencer Rattler, it's just hard to overstate how much more settled the quarterback situation is than it was at this time last year. I mean, played 4 last year. You know who QB1 and QB2 this year. I think that's important too. You've got an established backup as well. I think it's some of that. And also, we've heard a lot about this wide receiver group being improved too. That was something Shane Beamer talked about, Doty talked about. They're going up and making plays more, especially those. The term 50-50 ball wasn't used, but we've heard a lot about attacking balls in the air and going up and getting it. That's something we've heard Beamer challenge the receivers to do early in camp, and it sounds like that's kind of coming a little bit more to fruition through these scrimmages. And it makes sense because this is a big size-wise. This is a pretty big receiver group. I mean, Jaheim Bell's large. Josh Van is pretty big. Like this is a group that's capable of going up and getting balls, and at least it sounds like that's starting to happen more.
Yeah, Xavier Leggett actually is another person that kind of got called out as far as those big body, like wins contested balls. And then you got several guys that are a little smaller and niftier in Amarian Brown. And
he got some good praise yesterday too. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like to me, and this is something that I'm going to try to tackle this weekend. I'm going to try to put out a depth chart, 1 week out or whatever. It sounds like some of the main groups that we're kind of struggling putting the full picture together at the moment with is wide receiver, but it sounds like that's because there's so many good options, not really that there's.
Yeah, it's something that Satterfield said today was that, again, you got to add the coach speak caveat, but that starter maybe doesn't mean a whole lot. He used just kind of a rough example that there might be weeks where a starter plays 25 snaps and their backup plays 30, and then the next week the roles are flipped and that guy's playing 30, the other one's playing 25, even though they might technically be the starter or whatever.
Right.
They're going to throw the ball a lot. We know that. There's still questions with the running back room. I would have Christian Beal-Smith as doubtful at this point to play against Georgia State. It sounds like they're going to have to throw the ball at least against Georgia State. So yeah, I mean that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean Coach Beamer obviously kind of playing things close to the vest on the injury front, but he did say something, if you're reading between the lines, that was a little telling to me about Christian Beal-Smith, where he was like, we would like him to be out there if he can be, sort of thing. And it's like, all right, so maybe trending towards not, which
I would be surprised.
Yeah. You said he was kind of on the little scooter a little over a week ago. So
yep, he was. Yeah.
Some other of those position battles that are still kind of playing out. Third string quarterback. So like you said, Rattler is pretty established as number 1. Doty seems to have really solidified himself as number 2, and he continues to draw praise with how much he's grown from last season. But then they're still trying to figure out that third string quarterback position. So is it going to be the highly recruited Tanner Bailey? Is it going to be the sort of diamond in the rough Jalen Daniels? Is it going to be Braden Davis, who looked good in the spring game? And then, of course, Colton Gauthier. And I hate listing him so late because he's the most tenured member of those 4. But we just haven't heard, I guess, as much about him, except for, I'm sure he's doing great. From what I can understand, those 4, no one from that 4 has really stepped forward yet as an obvious third string quarterback. And then, of course, you have Joyner who can play quarterback too, so maybe he would.
Yeah, I honestly, it's hard because the whole thing for South Carolina last year was not having enough experience in the quarterback room. And I mean, let's face it, if you're at any point where you actually need your third string quarterback taking game reps, you're probably in trouble anyway. I don't think that's me speaking out of turn. But I think really, if it got down to it and they just wanted someone experienced who knew the offense well, it might be Dakereon Joyner, might be your third string quarterback. I mean, again, if you get down to that point, you've got much more pressing matters. But
I mean, if anyone is familiar with getting down to that point, it's South Carolina fans.
Yeah, you're getting even further than that. Last year, had a grad transfer or
right.
a grad assistant playing quarterback. Yeah,
but
but that's all the more reason I think they'd want someone
knock
with
on
more
wood, right? Yeah, knock on wood, right? Well, hopefully we won't have to really worry about who the third string quarterback is. But that is kind of one of the interesting topics that keeps coming up. And again, I think that you have an abundance of talent, but they're all young and inexperienced. So, I mean, it's a good problem to have. Maybe those guys start to differentiate themselves throughout the season a little bit. Maybe South Carolina gets up big in some games and can get a couple snaps for some of those guys too. We'll see how that goes. Another position that's still kind of shaking itself out is D line. Probably particularly on the inside. We pretty much know that the two Jordans are going to be on the outside. That what's his name?
You're looking at probably. I mean, you know, Zach Pickens and Boogie Huntley are going to be a big part of that inside. I think it's more the rest of the group there's questions about still. What's the role for TJ Sanders? He's a guy we talked about a little bit last week. It's what's the role for Tonka Hemingway? You know, I'm not really sure where he quite fits in the mix. You've got Terrell Dawkins, the transfer in from NC State. We haven't heard a lot about him yet in camp, which is kind of interesting, but he's definitely there, and they didn't bring him here to sit, so you have to figure he's going to be in the mix.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, and I wonder, I guess, why we haven't heard as much about him. I mean, you guys have been in the media room. Has anyone asked specifically about him, or he just hasn't come up? Or
not that's come to mind, actually, now that I think about it. That's just a name I thought of now running through the list in my head, but I don't think Terrell Dawkins has come up even once.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard even mention of like Gilbert Edmond before. I've heard.
Yeah, Gilbert Edmond. We talked to him. He was in there last week.
So yeah, that's interesting. Maybe
and MJ Webb too, another one.
Maybe Dawkins won't be relied upon as much as we would have projected back in the spring. Maybe he's still coming back from that injury in some way. I don't know.
Yep.
We'll have to see how that plays out. And then the last position that, at least as I'm working through the depth chart, the starters are easy here: Devontae Reed and RJ Roderick at safety, but then trying to figure out that group behind them. And actually, two freshmen got a lot of praise this week in Nick Emanwari, who we talked a little bit about last week, and then DQ Smith, who we haven't really talked too much about, but he's another freshman that got mentioned as a guy that's really sort of flashed here early.
Yeah, I really think if you had to, just off what we're hearing in press conferences and what we watched in practices, which obviously wasn't a ton, but if you absolutely had to choose one winner of fall camp for South Carolina, it sure sounds like it's Nick Emanwari. Everybody's been talking about how he's flying to the ball, how he's physical. We've heard about his tools a couple times. A few different players have talked about how he just has everything you need to be great out there. Beamer's talked about it. Clayton White's talked about it. Almost every defensive player who's been in there has talked about it. It's not nothing. Like, there's too many people who are bringing up this freshman who just got to campus who, as Shane Beamer said yesterday, was not even originally, he went to South Carolina's football camp last summer without a scholarship offer from anybody, and South Carolina found him there. I know that's something you've written about a little bit, just with South Carolina kind of finding these DBs and safeties kind of like that.
I remember seeing that quote. He said specifically, we loved our evaluation of him and offered a scholarship on camp, which is something that they did with Judge Collier earlier this year. Guy that had no stars on the services until that offer, had no real major offers. Emanwari ultimately ended up with 4 stars on Rivals by the time all was said and done last year. But South Carolina has done a really good job, and I am going to write a longer article on this, kind of comparing this to the 2023 and looking at the 2022 class, specifically the DBs. I think they've done a really good job of finding these diamonds in the rough. So another good example from the 2023 class is someone like Jalen Kilgore, who they were the very first to offer, and that's something that he kind of cited as being a big reason that he ultimately signed with South Carolina, even though over time he picked up some major offers from Georgia and Auburn and a couple other SEC schools, but they've done a really good job of kind of getting in early on some of those guys. And now eventually sometimes you have to fight off the major school whenever that happens, and they're not always successful. I mean, we saw this with Jaden Robinson, right, where Florida, where he really wanted to go, I guess, offered him the day before he announced for South Carolina, and then they weren't able to quite keep off, the local school there. But and a lot of times they have kind of won those battles, so it's interesting to see going forward, and that's definitely something that I'm keeping an eye on. Torian Gray is one of the most respected evaluators of talent in the country. So pretty much if he offers someone that's pretty much knocking a star onto them, like
right.
As soon as I reached out to the Rivals National folks about Judge Collier and was like, yeah, he just camped at South Carolina, Torian Gray offered him on the spot. They're like, oh, well, he's at least a 3-star then. It's like,
yeah. And then you think about last year too, of all the, kind of feel good, positive energy this team had coming out of last year, surprising some people. Maybe the biggest of it all was Jalen Foster pretty much coming out of nowhere and being an All-American at safety.
Right.
That's another one right there. And on that note, I don't have this in our rundown, but I was going to make a note. He's back in the building in some capacity. Nobody would commit to exactly what his title is. Clayton White used the term senior advisor roughly today. He said he doesn't have an official title for him, but in some capacity, Jalen Foster is back in the football building working with these safeties and corners, which can only be a good thing for South Carolina.
Yeah, honestly, still really surprising to me that he didn't ultimately at least get on like a practice squad or something somewhere in the NFL. But yeah,
I think it's a size thing as much as anything.
For sure. But like you said, good use of someone who's kind of come from that walk on to All-American sort of trajectory as a motivator, both from a abstract.
Beamer said exactly yesterday that there's going to be guys who aren't going to play as much as they want to next week.
Right.
You've got a guy in the building who went from a walk-on to an All-American now.
Right. Yeah. So you got that like abstract, like never give up sort of motivation factor.
Motivational posters in the building.
Yeah. But then also literally just from an X and O's factor, I think that's a good guy to have there at a position of need, right? Like either Roderick or Reed goes down and you're very thin.
That's that might be the one position where South Carolina is the lightest of anywhere would be at safety, especially on defense.
Right. Couple other like just random things that I saw over the last couple weeks from the various coaches. They're still like talking about Doty and how much he stepped up, both as a player but also as a leader. He said something. Beamer said something about he's one of 2 leaders on the football team as well, which I assume was him just saying that Rattler's the other.
It would have to be. I mean, you've got again. You talk about having different problems. If your back quarterback's your leader and your starter isn't, you have different problems.
But yeah, and I can't imagine that he was saying that there are only 2 leaders on the team either. So I think he probably that's just the way it came out or whatever. And then another interesting part that he's been talking a lot about is year 2 versus year 1. So the idea that this time last year they hadn't experienced a loss, didn't know how he personally would react to it, didn't know how his team would react to it. And so you have a lot less of those year 1 questions going into this year. Also, just a lot of the coordinators and stuff talked about comfortability with the playbook, all those sorts of things. So yeah, what's your feeling on the confidence heading into year 2 versus year 1?
The most interesting thing I got from all of that, I think this is something players are recognizing in Beamer too, is we heard this from Beamer himself and one player who I'm blanking, but he cataloged everything last year, which is to say he made notes. We practiced on this day. This is how we did. This was our energy level. This is what we went like. And he said, like, okay, this time I can refer that he said they're in mock game week this week. So they're doing all the stuff they would normally do during a game week, except obviously play a game on Saturday. And he said last year in Tuesday mock game week, 2 weeks before the opener, we didn't have a good practice. And I remembered that. I have that down, that Tuesday, 2 weeks before, was bad last year. How do we fix that this year? Apparently, and I guess that's probably not unusual for coaches. These guys are all playing things down to the minute, focus on everything. I don't think that's unique to Shane Beamer necessarily, but I did think that was interesting that he was very much trying to remember and replicate kind of what went wrong at different points, even in preseason last year, and seeing what can be done about that before you even get to games. Apparently,
it might be somewhat unique to him. I do know that coming out of the hiring process for Beamer, one of the things that was mentioned was in his interview specifically. He had this very intense attention to detail, and he had this whole step by step down to the smallest molecule sort of plan for how to rebuild the program. Now, yeah, maybe that's a normal thing to do for a job interview as big as this or whatever, but it does sound like that's just kind of the way his brain works. Another example of that I saw this week was when Satterfield was talking about fourth down situations. And I don't know if this is typical or not. I mean, maybe that makes sense, but he kind of said that Beamer has an idea by second down of a given series whether or not it's going to be a three or fourth down series, and he lets Satterfield know that. And yeah, I mean, maybe everyone does that, but I can imagine as an offensive coordinator that would be very helpful. Going into second and third down, like, okay, I actually have 4 plays here, or no, I really need to kind of push it. So
Satterfield said that Beamer was as good as anybody at that he's worked with. I don't know if that's coach speak. It seems like it might be, but either way, it's still, you have to have it that way. You can't have one kind of acting without the other. Those two have to work in tandem, especially when your coach is an offensive guy and he doesn't want a hand in that stuff. So it kind of has to happen that way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going to be the big, there were sort of some rumors around the program, I guess, that there were some miscommunication issues on offensive game planning and play calling or whatever at various times when they struggled, and then of course those things magically got fixed at times when they looked like things are going well. So I don't know how much credence I take to any of those sorts of rumors, but it seems like at least heading into the season, their flow of communication back and forth is where you'd like it to be. Anything else from Satterfield? Oh, one other just depth chart note, I guess, is he did say that Wanamaker and Wanham, that's DJ Wanham and Tyson Wanamaker, are still competing for that battle for right tackle. Any insight on that? Were you able to see anything really in practice?
I think we're just going to know the first time they take the field against Georgia State on offense by who's playing right tackle, honestly.
Right. And both those guys have a good bit of game experience. I'm sure.
I think Wanham probably has the inside track just because he played more down the stretch last year. I believe he was a starting right tackle in the bowl game. That'd be about my only insight there, but that's just one of those things I think we're going to have to wait for next Saturday.
I said DJ Wanham, didn't I? I meant Dylan Wanham. Yeah. Right. But yeah, so did I mean Dylan Wanham? So many Wanhams. Yes, I did mean Dylan Wanham.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Okay. And then the last coordinator that we heard from this week was Clayton White. And again, the only thing that really stood out to me was the turnover thing, because that is something that we talked about a little bit, that it's not really a sticky stat from one year to the next. And a lot of what kept South Carolina in games last year was winning the turnover battle. They were tied for 60th in the country and plus minus, which is all well and good. That's mostly because they turned the ball over a good bit too. But then
over a lot, yeah.
But then they forced 24 turnovers, which was tops in the SEC, like I said. But he didn't seem too worried about it. He was like, "We're tackling well." That's kind of
he did. He mentioned the one he mentioned was that they count turnovers on downs as a turnover, which I would assume most schools do. Right. But his point to saying that was more tackle well, fly to space, be in your position, fill the gaps, all that coach stuff. And you can still be successful on defense, even if the tip luck or the fumble luck isn't necessarily going your way the way it was last year, which, let's face it, it probably won't. I mean, you're talking about averaging almost 2 turnovers a game for an entire season. That's probably just not realistic, period.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. But you hope that you can at least finish more like middle of the pack at least with the turnovers, and then like we said, if the offense is making less mistakes, which it sounds like they are, then maybe that sort of balances out. Real quick correction on the Dylan Wanham thing because something sounded off about it. He had season-ending back surgery about halfway through the year last year.
You're right. Okay.
He didn't play in the bowl, but he does obviously have 5 years of experience.
He's got more experience. I still think that's, if I had to choose one, I think it's him, but I don't know.
Right. Anything else from fall camp that we didn't hit on from this week?
No, I think that pretty much covers it for camp. Today was the last time we're allowed in the building until next Tuesday, which is obviously game week. You've got Georgia State. I did want to throw in the weather just because we're 10 days out, but it looks like it could be really bad for Georgia State. The storm in the Caribbean materializes the way it might. I'm not a meteorologist. We can talk more about that next week, but I just wanted to toss that in because I saw it today and it's like, oh, okay.
I know it feels like we're too far out to know at this point, but if the weather report that I saw this morning holds true, I believe someone compared it to the 1999 game against NC State, which I was 9 years old, but I have always heard that as this incredible monsoon game. That was Lou Holtz's first game, I think, and it did not go well.
I think talk about maybe needing to throw the ball too. If Christian Beal-Smith's out, if the running back game room isn't maybe where it needs to be by week 1, and you talk about having to throw the ball in that, we'll see how the weather materializes. That's just going to have to be a wait and see thing, obviously. But
yeah, granted, I also think if it turns into like this run game versus run game thing, South Carolina's offensive line should be able to lean on Georgia State's defensive line over the course of that game. But Georgia State may have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that their quarterback is mobile. So, added element of having 2 guys in the backfield that can run. Not that Rattler can't run, but I don't think that they're going to want him to carry it 15 times during the game or anything.
I don't know. You put the word soggy in our group chat this morning, and I was just, oh, God. That would be quite a first step, be quite an opener.
Yeah. And so, by the way, next Thursday, our plan is to hop on and do a full preview of the Georgia State game. So definitely check back into GamecocksGroup.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or listen on Spotify or Twitter or Facebook or wherever it is that you like to watch us or listen to us. But game week previews will be Wednesday or Thursday, and then we're going to do reviews, or at least one of us or both of us will do reviews after each game. So just kind of a heads up on what the schedule looks like in football season coming up. One more thing before we get out of here, kind of a random out of season baseball note. Monty Lee, yeah, it is a pretty big one. D1 baseball actually called it the second best hire of the offseason, which fit it right in there right before the article got out there, I guess. But so yeah, former Clemson head coach Monty Lee, who also was an assistant under Ray Tanner, also coached at College of Charleston, is being hired as a assistant again now under Mark Kingston's staff. And then I know you got to sit in on his opening interview, and I didn't actually get a chance to watch much of that, so I'm going to let you kind of take over from there. But yeah, pretty big news, and I mean, it can't hurt to have a former head coach that's had varying levels of success at 2 different schools on your staff.
No, yeah, I was sitting in on that. That was on Zoom actually. Mark Kingston tested positive for COVID on Monday. Obviously, best wishes to him with that. So we were on Zoom, but I was on that call. I think the big takeaway for me, well, there's a baseball takeaway and there's non-baseball. The non-baseball stuff, more the career stuff, is that it does seem like Monty Lee really wanted this job. It didn't really break right for him the last couple of years at Clemson, but he's still at 14 years of head coaching experience, 7 at the Power 5 level. He got Clemson to the tournament a couple times. Like that's not an unqualified candidate to be someone's head coach. And he said he did have offers. He said he had pro baseball offers, but he said he wanted to be back in Columbia. He used the term no-brainer more than once on that call. So someone asked about why this job. He just said it's the University of South Carolina. He used that a couple times too. This really does seem like the one job he wanted. Oh, by the way, he's taking over for Chad Kaye. We should have started with that. That's the old hitting coach / recruiting coordinator. That's the job that Lee's going into. Chad Kaye retired to spend more time with his family. Lee did say that he was going to be spending most of it with the hitting coach as hitting coach / recruiting coordinator. But also he mentioned helping Scott Wingo with the infielders. He mentioned that he's going to be working with the catchers a little bit. It kind of seems like he's just there to do whatever Mark Kingston needs him to do, even though that is going to be majority hitting coach and recruiting coordinator.
Which, I mean, that's really where South Carolina needs to improve more than anything. They were sort of bottom of the SEC in almost every offensive category
Pretty much
last year. Sort of amazing that they competed as well as they did, especially considering how thin the pitching staff was by the end of the year too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that's where South Carolina is going to hope that they can turn things around. Now I did see that some people immediately started to speculate, like, okay, Kingston's on the hot seat. You bring in former head coach who's got South Carolina ties onto the staff. Any chance that you see, Kingston getting the boot after the season and then Monty Lee just kind of sliding right in there? Because to me, that seems like, well, he's a part of the staff. If things don't go well, I don't think that they're going to turn.
I don't think that would happen. I mean, I'll admit it crossed my mind, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's no way around it. It's a must. We can divide into expectations and this and that when we get closer to February or even through fall ball, but it's a must something year for the program. Must regional, super regional, hosting. You can divide that up however you want, but it can't be last year again. It has to be noticeably better than last year. I think everyone knows this is kind of last chance saloon for the Mark Kingston era. And if Monty Lee's here, he's going to help turn the ship around or probably go down with it. It's going to be one of the two this year. I have to assume.
I can't think of a scenario where I've ever seen so much reliance on your rival for both transfers and now
three Clemson transfers coming in. Yeah, 2 position players. You got Dylan Brewer. You got Jonathan French. He's a catcher. I'm blanking on the pitcher. I should have that here, but three transfers from Clemson as part of their 10 total, and obviously a hitting coach now, basically trying to save this era of South Carolina baseball.
Which, by all means, if it works, no one will care. Everyone will be like, "Great job, you made great moves." But if it does not work, that's immediately going to be a battle flag flown against Kingston.
It's going to be a very interesting series, that non-conference series next March between the two.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But, well, I mean, looking forward to how it all plays out. And I do think it's a kind of no-brainer move for Monty Lee, but I do think it's also kind of a no-brainer move for Kingston there. Like, if that guy's available and wants to be there, you can't really turn him down, even if there is some of that Clemson stigma on him or whatever.
Yeah, he did say, too, that it happened very quickly. He said it was like a few days between when Mark Kingston first reached out to him and when he got hired. Someone asked him if he'd had any conversations with Ray Tanner since he was hired. His old boss went to Omaha twice together in 2003 and 2004. He said only a couple because it just happened so fast. They hadn't really had time to fully digest it yet. And again, you could take that as Monty Lee saying yes immediately. You can take that as Mark Kingston just being like, all right, something has to happen here. We gotta move quick here before we kind of get into fall camp. You can take that a couple different ways, but it definitely sounds like this was a pretty snap move for everyone involved.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have full coverage of that as we get closer to the season, but definitely something interesting to fill these last couple of weeks of summer before we finally kick off. Like I said, on GamecockScoop.com, we'll have some coverage or some previews of week 0 for those of you that are football junkies and want to look into some of that. I'm going to finish up my season-long previews. So I just put out Missouri this past week. I have 4 more to go. So I got to do Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Florida, Clemson. So all those will be done by Monday or Tuesday. And then we're going to get right into previewing Georgia State.
Georgia State. Let's do it.
The Fighting Sean Elliott's. I think that's going to be an emotional game.
They're going to be very, very up for it.
Yeah. I plan on doing a little bit of a deep dive on Elliott himself. For those of you who haven't kept up with his career since he left South Carolina, he's been pretty successful, and I expect, it's a veteran team. I expect a little bit of a test early. Like I said before, South Carolina has them in star power pretty much across the board. So over the course of a game, unless it gets too ugly and bogged down and lets them hang around, that I do think ultimately it's going to be okay. But it could be interesting early for sure.
I think you used the term scary game. We talked about it about a month ago. That's pretty much, you have to have their attention. You have to take that serious. So this is not an FCS opponent. This is a group of 5 who won 8 games last year, including, it would have been 7 of their last 8 because they started 1-4 and finished 8-5. So they won 7 of 8 last year, bringing most of their guys back, bringing a quarterback back. Obviously with a former South Carolina head coach. That's a trap game is pretty much the word everyone's throwing around. But yeah, that's a trap game. It just is.
Yeah, no doubt. So, but honestly, I think that's a good way to start the season too, though, because you should win home in front of a pretty big crowd. You got the new light system installed.
I saw that today. Yep.
But there should be enough of a challenge that you have to deal with some adversity before you head on the road to Arkansas the next week too. So I actually
that is one thing we're going to know pretty fast about this team. Georgia State, Arkansas, Georgia, the first quarter of the season there. There's a lot of different ways that can go. And I think we'll have a pretty good idea of kind of what things look like heading out of the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Alan. Well, let's do it again next week and start previewing some real football. Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time, you can find us at GamecockScoop.com. Don't forget to subscribe and like and all that sort of stuff. Oh, really quick note for you, like business owners and stuff out there. We should have a sponsor, our first sponsor, coming on the podcast here soon, but there's still room for one more. And also there's some ad space on GamecockScoop.com too. So that's Rivals GamecockScoop at gmail.com if you want to reach out, talk to me about that. But anyway, until next time, I'll see you.